The next 35, 40 minutes, I'm just going to give only the evidence and the research that we have been doing for mindfulness along the topic of cognition, aging, and mental health. So let me share my slides. Okay. So you all can see that, I hope. All right, so let's just move on. Today's presentation is not, there is no disclosure specific to that. I'm funded by National Institute of Health and also Department of Defense and Industry and Philanthropy. I'm in a few scientific advisory boards. This is Beth Israel Dickness Medical Center, a clinical teaching and research affiliate of Harvard Medical School. And I've been here for the last 20 years. So the outline of today's talk will start with mental health, then we'll go to cognition, then we'll finish with aging. So 1948, World Health Organization got it right. What is health? It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just merely an absence of disease or infirmity. The way we currently practice, we just focus on the second component, and we do not, take into account the holistic well-being of somebody. So let's just focus on mental aspect of this topic. So before COVID, more than 50% of population will be diagnosed with a mental disorder in our lifetime. 1 in 5 Americans mental illness in a year, 1 in 20 with a serious mental illness, and 42 million people suffer from anxiety disorders. It's astounding to say that suicide is the second leading cause of death. Now, COVID for the last 15 months, you can totally understand what is going to happen. And most astounding of this statistic is 1 in 6 actually have binge drinking. That's really, really, I believe right after the shutdown, the alcohol sales went up by 700%. So that tells you what you need to know. Let's just focus on the stress and anxiety part, and I'll leave the rest to the experts like Dr. Radhika on the psychiatric disorders. Everyone reacts differently to stressful situations. We call that as perceived stress. The same amount of stress can be perceived differently by different people. And we all have unique coping mechanisms, and mostly all these coping mechanisms are not holistic. See, there's sufficient evidence, research published in JAMA, which talks about interventions like exercise classes, relaxation techniques, snacks, social hours, hobbies, do not really support this perceived stress, do not bring it down. So they're not really effective. So what else can be done is what we're looking at, right? So most of the times, this is the work done by David Vago from Vanderbilt and David Silberschweig from Brigham and Women's. This is the cycle of what is happening with anxiety, distress, and depression. Initially, it's all about me, and they talk about I'm worthless and life is unfair, my future is hopeless, and this just becomes like a negative feedback to them, and they just keep getting more and more into this situation, right? And this is a complicated picture, but if you just look at this middle portion, mental noting and labeling, that is when you're sitting down and thinking about something, what happens? So you have a habitual portion of thinking on the right side. That is, you keep thinking about something and your flight of ideas, you switch from that to something else and to something else and just lose track of what exactly happened, which means that you're not in the present moment. And so you will have that basically decentering from what you should be doing, and it goes into disengagement from, again, your action or your task. And that is basically what happens during lack of awareness. Now, when you do this meta-awareness, so somehow if you gain meta-awareness, you're clearly noting all these things and you're inhibiting all these decentering responses and disengagement and re-engaging yourself back into the moment. So that is, even though it looks a little complicated, but it's very easy to understand why this is happening, right? So we'll focus on the evidence supporting the prevention of mental health and maladaptive behavior. So it's all about adaptation to the stress situations. Have we equipped ourselves to face or conduct these different environments is the whole question. So this Medscape slides, I'm sure many of you have looked at it. It's almost 30 to 50% of physicians in any field are affected by burnout. So this is a very common slide, which is often under display. The most telling statistics here is about the suicide rates in physicians is twice that of the general population. So that is really astonishing. So what did we do? In about 3 years ago, we looked at our own surgeons, nurses, and anesthesiologists And we just took a cross-sectional perceived stress score survey. Because I'm an anesthesiologist, I'm just looking at people around me. And you can see that these numbers, the perceived stress scale of 16, is usually indicative of some amount of either moderate amount of stress or high mild stress. So this is our hospital real data. And so there is a well-defined problem. Surgeons, especially when they are facing a situation, they don't have to really, it's just the thought of making a decision. Should I go this way or that way? That itself is enough to put them into some kind of stress. And this big article that included a very large number of medical schools from all around the world basically talked about the prevalence of depression and the depressive symptoms among medical students, the most highly educated population. So there seems to be a well-defined problem, and looks like there's also a well-defined solution, like publications in JAMA, nursing journals, and anesthesia journals talk about self-care as the most important professional imperative in order to decrease the physician burnout. But there's a disconnect. We seem to know what we should do, but really don't do it. So I'm just going to focus today. It is possibly because people say, I don't have time. I don't know what meditation is. I cannot really sit quiet. So we all have this kind of misconception. So I'm just going to pick one school of yoga, which is Isha school. And because that's the only thing I'm familiar with, there may be many other schools which are basically doing similar things, but I'm just sticking to what I know best. So when you look at these dimensions, Isha school is a comprehensive school. It has everything for everyone. If you have 5 minutes, we have a practice. You have 10 minutes, there's a practice. With 15 minutes, there's a different practice. So whatever, right? If you say I cannot have a empty stomach, then you have different practices. So that's what is very attractive to me. You can just enjoy the benefits here and stop there, or you can go all the way and investigate and be a curious George, right? So Upa Yoga is before even you get into yogic postures, there are certain things that can be done at any time. Common examples of Sukha Kriya, there is common balanced breathing, on chanting, which we can talk as mantra, then Yoga Namaskar, which is a simple posture, but effective postural practices. They can really take care of your back pain, etc. And there's a guided meditation, which is a 12-minute guided meditation. This is free, online, simple, effective in multiple languages. And of all the literature that is available, guided meditation is the one that seems to be effective, especially for novices. Then if you want a complete overall of mind, body, energy, emotions, you have inner engineering. You can just do simply 7 online modules, or you can go on and complete it and get into a 21-minute meditation practice, or you can go further like 4-day retreat or a conscious undoing process, or even an intense breath watching practices. So there is a spectrum of practices that are available. So let's just focus on some of this evidence that's out there. Does Upa Yoga work? It seems to be very simple. Does it work? So we took Loblaws Canada, which is a big food distribution company, and we just looked at their employees, very large number of employees, I think more than 50 or so, and we gave them a simple Upa Yoga practices. And then we looked at their negative subscales and positive subscales of profile of mood scores, and we followed them up over 5 weeks. You can see that the more they do it, the more consistent they are, these negative subscales start decreasing. So you have to be consistent with whatever practice you choose to do. You have to really do it, at least do it 4 days a week or so in order to get benefits out of it. Now, next one, the 15-minute guided meditation work or not. Again, you can learn this. It is online. It's in YouTube videos. I can vouch for its efficacy. And basically, within an hour, you can learn and then start doing it as a 15-minute practice on a daily, regularly. So we took about 300 anesthesiologists, surgeons, residents, and physicians, and we took them right in the middle of the day or in the early part of the day, when you're supposed to be very energetic and robust. What you can see is when we took both in the grand rounds or in the anesthesia conferences, you can basically see the total mood disturbances with the single 15-minute practice comes down. The higher the mood disturbance, the worse the situation is, or more negative they are. So reducing the total mood disturbance is important. So whether it is a surgeon or an anesthesiologist, a simple 12-minute practice, really they were sitting and meditating in a large hall, you can see that the negative subscales goes down. So when you look at here, anger, depression, fatigue, confusion, significant reduction in each of these scales. So it's not even funny that the negative subscales with just one-time practice, if you sustain it, you will start seeing changes in the positive subscales, like vigor. So does this practice can have brain changes similar to that of other meditations that is out there? And so we advertised this to clinicaltrials.gov. Few volunteers who just signed up for it. We looked at their EEG, simply with the 32-channel bios. Once they completed the Isha Kriya meditation, you can see that they had prominent theta and gamma bands within 6 weeks of consistent practice, which is, what does this mean? It means that they're relaxed as well as alert. So usually only one of the other happens. If you're alert, you're obviously tensed. If you're relaxed, then you're totally relaxed. So you're not even aware or alert. So having this combination is important for us. And also there is some evidence that functional connectivity improves between various circuits, executive control network, salience network, default mode network, etc. And so this paper is under work and hopefully we'll publish it soon. Now with the COVID pandemic, does the online delivery of these programs work? That is the most important question. Or do we have to be in the presence of someone, or do we have to have face-to-face delivery of these? So we took about 71 eligible participants from a S2 tech company. It's an IT company. And our primary outcome was burnout. And our key secondary outcome was perceived stress. So what did we see in them, right? That's basically what we're looking at. So this was the design of the study. This was a randomized controlled trial. It was a waitlisted randomized controlled trial. The reading arm was basically the control arm. We told them just read something for 15 minutes a day. It should be something related to health, versus IEO interventions, which are 7 modules that you have to learn. Every module is about 90 minutes at your own pace within a month. And in 4 weeks or so, we just followed them up with neuropsychological questionnaires. The reading group crossed over to the IEO interventions. Then we followed them up as well. So this is a typical design in the mindfulness studies. What do you see here? So the blue line is where inner engineering online is given from the first 4 weeks. You can see a significant reduction in their perceived stress scale, which is a key secondary outcome in those who are compliant participants. And if this red group at this week 4, even though it showed minimal decreases in the PSS, showed a significant decrease when that group also received the intervention. So again, really telling you that there's something here, and probably we need a very large study to confirm this. Now, is it enough if I do just 7 online modules, or should I take home practice? Basically, you're asking, should I have just the theory and do some Upayoga practices, or add on some significant 21-minute meditation as a result of that? So from last year onwards, the founder of Isha Foundation, he himself delivered this Completion Online as a 1-day program. So we took these participants and we saw whether they actually showed sustained changes over 6 weeks of getting online initiation like that. So you can see that a large number of these people are white, 86%. I'm sorry, 49% of them are white. And so there's a good distribution of races and gender, etc. here. So what did we see? We measured the perceived stress scale, the sleep quality scale, awareness scale. Every one of them had a significant improvement for the better well-being. And you can see over time, before initiation, right after initiation, but after 6 weeks or so, when they're consistently practicing this meditation, one would see a significant reduction in the stress, and which is what we are seeing. Again, this paper is under manuscript writing process. So this 4-day practice, if it was given face-to-face, work done by Deepak Chopra and his group, actually had shown that there is significant reduction in the stress. If you consistently practice, there is a continuous line. The horizontal line is where people are not practicing, and well-being scale is, again, improved when you consistently practice the given practices. So at least 6 times per week is what they concluded. Then if you want to go on to the next level, what is actually happening? What is the mediation behind this? So the work led by our collaborator, Dr. Sadasivam from Indiana University, which is a 4-day retreat when it happened in the Isha Institute of Inner Sciences, we saw that their depression scale really decreased, their anxiety decreased, and their anandamide levels actually increased after this 4-day retreat significantly. And BDNF, which is a brain-derived neurotrophic factor, increased by about 70%. So very significant change, potentially paving way that these are the ones that are actually responsible for potential changes in the neuropsychological scores. Now, if you go to a very extreme level of 8-day retreat, this was a very robust study led by the same investigator with blood samples and also neuropsychological questionnaires drawn at various time points. You can see in them, again, published in Fontes and Psychology recently, if you take this important result, people with baseline depression, when they go for this retreat, they have a significant reduction in those CESD scales, showing that the depression was reduced, and also this lasted for almost 3 months. So this effect lasted for 3 months, and same for anxiety. So there is concrete evidence now that these practices are worthwhile for people with mental health issues. Specifically, we're talking about anxiety and stress, right? And the conscious undoing meditation that I talked to you about also has increased gamma power, which is essential for learning. And this work was done by Brabowitz and Arnaud Delorme from France, looking at the Shunya meditation, comparing with Himalayan yoga traits and also Vipassana meditation. So basically showing that Shunya showed increased gamma power versus controls. Now, if you take it to extreme levels, and let's say that you do like 3-month retreats or so, and this group, again, Paul Mills and Rael Khan from UCSD, basically they showed that they have a robust cortisol awakening response and a 3-fold increase in BDNF. I'm talking about 300% increase in BDNF. And BDNF has been really implicated in many neurodegenerative disorders as well as depression. Now, we took this and then we say, okay, what is happening in the COVID era, right? So COVID times when everything is shut down, we thought, okay, if people who are doing inner engineering and beyond, are they well suited to combat the situation, to really face the situation? That was a question we asked. This is methodology paper that got published in Contemporary Clinical Trials. And then we also looked at the results. So you can see a very complicated study design by this group was led by us. And you can see seasoned yoga practitioners, about 5,000 of them. So I'm talking a very large sample size. And cohort 2, about 2,500 age, gender, and also zip code match controls. And then we took these controls and we randomized them into 2 groups. One is the active arm. We just gave a 3-minute breathing practice called Simha Kriya. And then comparator arm was you can do whatever you want. And basically we followed them up over 12 weeks. And this shows the geographical distribution over 12 weeks. You can see that most of them are from Northeast, Florida, Texas, and California. And you see sparse amount of activity or participation from Midwest and overall, but it was similar at all 3 time points. And what did we see? Again, this work is under review. You can see that in those who were seasoned yoga practitioners, they had the lowest levels of stress throughout the peaks of pandemic last year. This is all data from US. And similarly, well-being scale was really high in the same participants. Now, in the randomized group, they had the same starting point. We just gave them a 3-minute Simha Kriya practice. They had to do consistently. In those who compliantly participated in it, you can start seeing a reduction in their stress scale. So you can ask, so what? It's just a 3-minute practice, but data is data. And this is what data is telling us, that even a 3-minute practice can make a difference if it is done consistently. So then we went on to look at fMRI. And so this group is, again, from Indiana University. This is a 7-day retreat. And what did we see? We saw an increased connectivity in the executive cortical network, especially for leaderships, etc. There was a difference between before and after Samyama, and also when it's compared to the control group. So significant improvements in attention, memory, impulse control, emotional stability, and self-awareness and problem solving. So that work is also under review with Fontes. So now let's just switch gears here to COVID-related stuff, especially respiration. And we all know as physicians, there is thrombosis, there is edema and fibrosis of lungs. So they all have breathing difficulty. And as anesthesiologist, I'm fond of this oxygen delivery to the body. So it depends on the hemoglobin and cardiac output. Cardiac output is dependent on heart rate and stroke volume. What does yoga do? There is autonomic nervous system regulation, and you have a lower heart rates. Basically, you become an efficient machine. That is, for somebody, if they have to do 72 beats per minute for the same amount of activity, if you're doing consistent yogic practices, you can do it at a very low heart rate, maybe around 50s or 60s, depending upon what you do. This could possibly be even achieved by regular exercises. And there's better ventilation of all parts of the lungs, and there's an optimized ventilation perfusion. And in COVID, basically, this gets messed up. That is, there's mismatch of this. And so if you are doing some breathing practices, you're probably in a better position to counter this, or at least sustain mild COVID issues. So what is Simakriya that I mentioned? It's a 3-minute breathing practice. The work we did with PGA Chandigarh, we just wrote a concept paper as to why Simakriya could be very useful. Professor Akshay Anand led that work. And there are 3 stages to it. And there's, again, freely available on YouTube's, and anyone needs it, we can provide those links. And there's 3 stages with specific, specific practices that you need to do at each stage. Now, the respiratory function improves, lung capacity increases, improved oxygen saturation. And another work with MD Anderson, what we found was for physicians and also other healthcare practitioners, was this Simakriya feasible and acceptable? And we found actually, yes, it was. And you can see that a number of them are Hispanic population, non-Hispanics, about 60% of them are whites, and they were all responsive. And they said, yeah, we found the meditation practice useful. They found it peace after meditation. I'm just talking about 3-minute practice. Could be just called as a breathing practice. All you have to do is just follow the instructions. There's nothing more. Just follow instructions. Now we took it to the next level, led by Professor Vijay Chandran from University of Florida. Does Isha Yoga help you with immunity, right? So again, with about 100 samples taken from the 7-day retreat, taken at 4 different time points. It is time point 1, 60 days before the retreat, time point 2, just before the retreat, time point 3 is just after the retreat, time point 4 is 3 months after the retreat. So these are heat maps you can see for all the blood collection data depicting the expression of the top 10 genes that were found. So what did we find? If my slide moves, yes. So protein-protein interaction network, immune effector process, activation of immune responses, RNA catabolic processes, regulation of mitotic cells. So you can see they just did a very robust work and analysis. And what did they see? They saw that in meditation, that is with this 7-day retreat, there is activation of all these STAT1 receptors, and basically they're all related to interferon pathway. And interferon pathway is very important to counter the COVID antigen. And you can see in mild COVID-19, the interferon pathway is still kind of active. Red means it's active. Whereas in severe COVID, they just go down, blue, basically dysregulated gene. And that's what happens in severe COVID, potentially paving some hypothesis that if you do this kind of programs, you are activating the interferon pathways, and you are probably well suited to counter this COVID antigen. Now, for the interest of time, I'm going to skip this video, but you can see that the Isha Yoga practices during COVID, there was an administrator. We did a webinar with Sadhguru, and what we found was there was an administrator.
I'm the chief nursing officer, but in this COVID-19 response, my main responsibility has really been being the lead incident commander for our response to COVID-19. And really what that's all about, we talked a little bit earlier, Dr. Faro and others, about the example of ventilator allocation. And we're all very grateful that we haven't actually had to face that particular problem. But we in fact do have to make resource allocation decisions all the time, maybe smaller ones, but pretty impactful ones. So I'll give you a couple of examples and then I'll ask my question. Early on in this epidemic, probably in the March period, we came to understand that our supply of masks was short, our surgical masks. We didn't have enough. We still don't have enough, but then we were really worried about it. But we did figure out over the first couple of weeks that the virus could be transmitted by someone who wasn't symptomatic. We initially, because of our limits, allocated surgical masks only to those units that were clearly caring for COVID-19.
So I'll stop there. So her main question was, I'm sure many of you are administrators in your practices. Her main question was, she was asking, how do I live with kind of decision-making processes when I restrict this to somebody, and how do I live with that? So Sadhguru responded by saying that all you have to do is, have I given my best in that particular situation? So many times Marsha came and talked to me and said that settled her. And basically she wasn't having that baggage in her shoulders about whether I made the right decision or not. So, so you have to have theoretical knowledge as well as these practices to really make things work for you and really turn around from the mental health point of view. So I'm going to switch gears here for the next 5-10 minutes and talk about cognition and aging. So it changes in the aging brain, we all know that, but there is also some data that might not be known, is very well known as brain age can actually be measured. And the slowing down of these neurotransmission is what is mentioned, and majority of the slides were courtesy Professor Ken Singer from Boston College. And the National Institute of Aging talks about how parts of the brain important learning and other complex mental activities shrink, communications may not be as effective, blood flow to the brain decrease with aging, inflammation which occurs when the body response to injury may increase. Most of us, or at least myself, we all thought once these changes take place, we cannot reverse them. But it doesn't seem to be true. It seems like brain maintains the ability to change and adapt. So potentially by starting some of these work, like the meditation, etc., we can reverse some of these processes if it's not too far out. And now AARP members, 90% of them showed that staying mentally sharp was their primary top health-related interest, right? So this is a brain age paradigm. Professor Brandon Westover from MGH put this work out in JAMA, and they use overnight sleep EEG activities, and with that, they calculate brain ages. They have almost data over 20,000 people, and they correlate that brain age with the chronological age. And you can see here that brain age gap, that is, if the brain age is more than the chronological age, you go on the positive side in the x-axis. If it is less than the chronological age, you go on the left side. So you can see that if it is on the left side, your disability is low. If you go on the right side, which means that your brain age is higher than the chronological age, your disability is more. And again, this was published in Translational Psychiatry. Cognitive superages behave like 20 and 30 years younger. So how can we achieve that, right? So there are different types of memory: perceptual memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, and semantic memory. And perceptual memory is information in the world, and very short. If you look at this, this is retina, optic nerves, visual area, visual cortex. This is the only thing that is active. It's in seconds. During the perceptual memory process, it is not affected by aging, and you will retain the perceptual memory. And of course, the processing takes place in occipital lobe, right? They undergo very little change with age. But you can see here in this MRI picture that young adults and the older adults, basically there's a lot of spacing and less density of your brain. So there is loss of prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for processing speed. And that could be the reason for reducing working memory, right? There are simple associative tasks. People might forget to stop on a red light, or if you're given an yellow light, they won't know whether to cross or to stay. So even now we have the problem. So complex choice tasks. And it's harder to switch between tasks. These are all things that is beginning to happen when you're 50 years of age or older. Long-term memory is basically a function of hippocampus, and it shrinks with aging and Alzheimer's. So less activity in the hippocampus and you lose it. Whereas remote memory and semantic memory, it's all in the cortical regions and it's not dependent on the hippocampus. And that's why that is preserved. People will remember remote things because of these situations, the remote memory and semantic memory. So how does this happen? This information, this perceptual memory becomes a short-term memory, which is basically the frontal lobe. Long-term memory, which is all in the hippocampus, and remote memory, which is in the neocortex, or the semantic memory, which is basically factual knowledge. This is not affected. This is not affected. These two are affected. And there are different ways to counter that. It seems like, how can yoga help this phase, right? Attention, that is engagement in the moment, can actually improve and turn your working memory to long-term memory, to remote memory. Single point focus meditation can help you do that. Or samyama, which is also one form of breath watching, can transfer the information to a memory store, which is a very long duration. And so it seems like we can actually improve this memory to remote memory situations. Again, stress-free learning is very essential in order to retain anything. And we have shown that with EEG and fMRI, relaxed alertness is the result of any type of meditation, not just Isha meditation, and that can help you to learn in an effective way. And it's all about connecting the dots, right? So potentially there's decreasing prefrontal cortex inhibition. And so whatever prefrontal cortex you have, it is effectively participating in the memory situations. There's increased clarity and there's more organization of all the information that you have and leading to very long-term memory in you. So successful aging research suggests that there are 6 critical elements. This is from McKnight Brain Institute in Florida. Staying physically active, managing your comorbid conditions, talking with family members and making sure that they're not noticing anything abnormal in you, and talking with your doctor about any health conditions, staying socially and intellectually engaged. And there's more and more data coming out that loneliness is associated with more memory loss, getting the recommended amount of sleep, daily yoga and meditation. Aliveness need not go down with aging. Maybe you might slow down with your physical ability, but your mental aliveness need not go down, right? November and December 2020, we were fortunate to get Sadhguru's permission to establish a center and also Harvard's permission to establish a center at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center called Sadhguru Center for a Conscious Planet, which enhances cognition, consciousness, and compassion. And now it is active. We're almost 6 months into it. We're basically making it research focused for people who are naysayers to bring them in. If you're an experienced yoga practitioner, you don't need this evidence, but I think it'll be useful to provide that kind of evidence to a lot of naysayers. So a lot of effort goes into research. We also have the educational webinars that we've done in the last 6 months, or sorry, 1 year or so, has almost 5 million impressions in YouTube. And outreach is headed by Tulsi Chase, and she's also a trained Hatha Yoga teacher and master's in education. Our program manager is Sepide Harivi, who's a PhD in physics, and she has joined me in my efforts to increase our visibility and also providing research evidence for all that I've talked so